Who would have expected this? That 40 Labour MPs have warned the Prime Minister that the planned disability cuts are impossible to support. So it was always going to be a problem for the Labour Party to be making all sorts of cuts after all of their, long history of attacking austerity. And now, lo and behold, this is looking to be one of the biggest rebellions since the beginning of this government. The Labour MPs are just simply not having it and feel that this is going to attack those who are already below the poverty line.
But will they really? I mean, do you remember the winter fuel allowance? Those who were too sheepish just abstained, and in the end it just went through quite smoothly.
Yeah, I think that's right. Obviously it's more than 10% of Labour MPs, so it's not a tiny proportion. But in the scheme of things, it's not enough to threaten Labour's majority. And I think that's the challenge for this government, is they have to face down. If you look at this list of 40 MPs, you could guess half of the names. It's like the usual suspects, plus a handful of people on the soft left. And the government has to face them down and say, the welfare bill is unaffordable. I think the welfare bill is one of the areas where Labour can make a real difference over the next few years by being genuinely radical and being honest about the fact that many elements of it are completely unaffordable.
Well, you
Ali,
could say that.
Can I ask you who you think Labour stand for? Because they don't stand for farmers, they don't stand for pensioners, they don't stand for business, they don't stand clearly now for the vulnerable and those on benefits, they don't stand for the working class. Who are Labour for?
I don't think it's true at all that they don't stand for those groups. I mean, obviously the farmers, they have, they've trashed their relationship with the farmers for sure. I think business,
Pensioners.
I've said, but they're maintaining the triple lock.
Yeah, but
so every pensioner is better off as of April than they were in the last tax year. That is true. Every single pensioner has more money from the state post-April than they did before the winter fuel allowance.
I actually had somebody write to me to point out that she was £9 better off, full stop.
So better off.
Yeah, but if that's really better off, take into account inflation and everything else. She did a whole thing of how much she gets, how much she's left with £9.
We've had pensioners have had about 14 years of the triple lock. They are far better off in terms of the money they get from the state than they were when the Conservatives came in 2010. Now, personally, I think the triple lock should be binned. I think it's a complete waste of money. I think it's totally unjustifiable. That's not going to happen. But I think that would have been a much better way of saving money than the winter fuel allowance.
I think the May elections answered your question there, Ben. I think it's going to be interesting to see what this is like further down the road, because if the Labour MPs do end up falling into line and accepting these disability cuts, that's going to look like bad form and not go down very well with the people who did support this Labour government. Or alternatively, they stick with it and upset people. I mean, either way, it's a lose-lose situation. And I think all you have to look at is the reform landslide to see that it's not the working class, particularly up in the north, that the Labour Party are representing. It's been a long, long time since they betrayed the working class and decided to represent elite interests.
There's a major challenge with the working class, that's no doubt, and I think Reform are going to sweep up, even looking ahead to the general election, I think they'll sweep up a ton of working class votes. But if Labour can bring back some of the jobs that they're talking about, they've increased the minimum wage, and improve the health service in the way that I believe they will. If they can achieve those things, and that is an if, that I think they can actually make a case to the working classes that they're the right party to back.
I don't believe that. I think that the people are looking at the whole migrant situation, and I think that will lead a lot of the votes. I don't think because they know that another government comes in might tamper with bits and pieces. But to me, I think the big question is immigration, which we should move to, because there's a story now about Iranian suspects may have come in on small boats. I have to come back to you on this one.
And yet another surprise there, that people who have bad intentions would abuse the fact that we basically don't have any borders. This is a story in today's Eye. 5 of those Iranian nationals who were arrested, suspected of plotting to target the Israeli embassy. This former military intelligence officer has said that it's very likely that they belong to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which bizarrely doesn't seem to be a prescribed organisation, or the Iran's Quds Force, which is part of the military intelligence. you know, it's just not surprising, is it, if people were to be coming in? And I'm sure that, those who pose a security risk won't be limited to those who might have connections to the Iranian state, which, of course, Iran does deny. But it would be pretty surprising if it wasn't being abused in that way.
Well, I think, firstly, kudos to the security services for preventing what could have been an absolutely horrific attack. And goodness knows how many similar attacks they're preventing every single week.
Lots.
Absolutely loads. In terms of, look, they may have come over on small boats, they may not have done. Clearly, we haven't made much progress in terms of the numbers on small boats in the last year. The gangs have not yet been smashed. But I do think if you look at some of the agreements that are being made and the progress that's been made in the relationship with France, for example, I think we're getting there and starting to make progress. But this was always going to be
What makes you think we're making progress?
I think that we're coming towards a better agreement with France. We've been giving them, I think, 500 million over 3 years, which doesn't seem to have been particularly well spent. So we need to look at that.
But surely beginning to make progress would manifest itself as a reduction in numbers. No?
Of course it would, and
so
that's
we're not making progress.
We haven't done yet, but this was always going to be a problem that was going to take a really long time to turn around. I don't believe that any political party could have come in last July and made an immediate...
They could have made a better improvement than this one. They could have kept Rwanda, and they could have perhaps not gone on a silly policy of smashing the gangs. Let's move on to this one. Reform will ask public to spot wasted cash. Andy.
Yeah, so his name you might remember, Darren Grimes, who's now a Reform councillor in Durham. And he's saying that he wants to ask members of the public to basically audit council spending and decide what should and shouldn't be cut, rather than bringing in consultancies like PwC, who are very expensive and imply additional costs, to identify those savings. I mean, look, I think there's something in that, but I'd say two things. Firstly, we have representative democracy for a reason. We have councillors and MPs at the Westminster level whose job is to identify where those cuts should fall. It shouldn't be a public vote or a referendum on everything.
But they're not doing a good job.
I really don't think that.
The people who live it so locally, which is important, what this is a transference of power to actually the locality and the people of that region. I think it's quite a good idea.
I mean, we've seen councils that are going bankrupt, and the sorts of things that they're spending money on is absurd. So the idea of having a kind of Doge looking to cut stupid spending in local councils, I think is a very good idea. And as I think it was a quote from Darren said, you know, that the Reform councillors are going to have a look under the bonnet and see what's been going on. That's exactly what we need. And I think there hasn't been a culture of transparency in local councils. People see their council bills going up and up and up, and they're getting less and less and less for their money. The roads are absolutely awful. People aren't getting their bins collected.
How often are your bins collected, just out of curiosity?
Once every 2 weeks.
Yeah, what a joke. Me too.
Every 2 weeks.
Andy?
And it's always overflowing.
Recycling, I think, is once a week, once every other week for general run.
And I have to pay for the green bin, which I didn't have to pay for before, and I don't see why I should. It's a subscription.
They're trying to do once every 3 weeks now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's third world standards.
We've got 3 bins between, 4 flats? Once every 2 weeks.
Can I say something quickly on local council spending? 2 things. Number one, 27% real terms cuts in local spending since 2010. So the low-hanging fruit's gone. It's not that easy, actually, to find savings. And secondly, half of your council tax money goes on social care.
See, I don't think it's true that the low-hanging fruit has already been got at, because so many of these councils are paying people unbelievably high salaries. The whole thing is, you know, it's a gravy train in some of these councils. They are spending money on things that are not the job of the council, and not spending money on the things that they should be. And I do think if you have councillors, people like Darren, who are going to go in there and with the help of the public, identify the sorts of things that need to be cut, then that can only be a good thing.
I'm going to ask you very quickly about your thoughts on the appointment of Pope Louis XIV.
Leo XIV.
Leo, how can I forget?
I don't know, I have a good feeling about him. It was quite funny, actually, because when he came out onto the balcony, I was waiting with bated breath, and then this guy walks out, and I have no idea who this guy is. Nobody expected him.
Did you use some of the others?
Apparently, somebody put a bet down on him. Someone might need to check this, but apparently somebody bet $2,000 because nobody expected that he was going to win, and got 100k from that bet. So, I mean, wow. We'll have to see. I think he's a continuity candidate with Francis. He's sort of, I suppose you would say, centre-left theologically, but amazing to have the first American Pope. Lots of people have been joking online that J.D. Vance was the last person that the last Pope met with, and the next Pope's an American. Looks a bit suspicious.
Well, we saw Trump to do his little thing on socials of him as a Pope.